So now we're heading to land, and we're going to hear from Clay Stark. Clay is an adventure cyclist. Clay raced the 508 solo randonneur in 2016. It's a 508-mile ultra cycling race. He went on to compete the TransAm bike race in 2017, an unsupported race across America from Oregon to Virginia. It crosses 10 states at 4,300 miles, and he did it in just 28 days. Yeah, he's not good enough at math to figure out how many, that's a lot of miles per day. He is just coming back from an unsupported cycling trip for 3 months in West Africa. So Clay lives in Hillsburg, and per his words, he's just an old man on a bike.
I just got back. Is this working, everybody? I just got back from Africa a week ago, so I don't quite have Cyril's enthusiasm. Yeah, I'm still transitioning home. So yeah, I cycling. I'm the landlubber in the group. All three paddlers, I think. So I have an interesting story. I cycled a lot when I was younger. I rode across Mexico. I did a lot of touring in the U.S. and across the states. But then I, grew up, and adventures became less hard. You get married, and you have kids, and you sit in a cubicle, and yeah, it was a great adventure. It still is, never ending. But 5 years ago, I was 250 pounds and sitting in a cubicle, and I got sick. A big tumor in my neck, and long story short, it was chemo and radiation and surgery and the whole bit. And I lost, because I got my mouth radiated, I couldn't eat, I lost a whole bunch of weight. But I started riding my bike to radiation just to feel human again. You don't feel very human. I don't know if we've all known somebody who's been through it, it's awful. But riding my bike felt good. And because I'd lost so much weight, I had zero fitness. I'm going to radiation. But I felt comfortable on the bike just because I'd lost my belly and the extra weight. So I just started riding. And 1 year after I finished treatment, actually the date is interesting because it's March 15th, coming up here in a few days, is my 5-year anniversary where they change your diagnosis from remission to resolved, I think, or something like that. But no more office visits, so it's good stuff. As I started riding again, I had it in me from when I was younger. I toured a lot, and so I just started doing distance, and I found that was my strength, was distance. I wasn't winning any races. I'm the big guy. Cyril's a little guy. I'm the big guy. I like to eat, and so cycling's great for eating. You get to eat all you want, and if you keep riding, you can keep eating. So it's pretty fun. So I started doing double centuries. That was my first goal, and so my first double century was 1 year after I finished chemo and radiation. So March 15th of 2013, I had my last chemo and radiation treatments. And March 15th of 2014, I rode a double century. So that was a huge goal and cool thing to achieve. I've ridden that every year since then. So except for this year, I was in Africa. So from there, it was just how far can you go? I just excelled at distance, not speed, not hill climbing. I wasn't a natural athlete. I just loved to be on the bike, and I had no problem riding 14 or 15 hours a day. So training consisted of leaving my house in Petaluma at 3 in the morning and going 200 miles north to Standishiki State Park, or 200 miles south to Monterey and back on Sunday. And so that was my main training ride. So people ask, don't you get bored 15 hours, 16 hours on your bike? You're never really bored. There's so much to do, to eat and drink and navigate and stay safe on a ride like that you spend a lot of solo hours for sure, but it's never really boredom. So this is my rando bike. I built it for long distance, the touring bike. This is in Idaho when I was still fresh and pretty early in the ride. The bike's pretty clean. This is the TransAm bike race that I did June of last year. So it was 4,300 miles across the U.S. 136 of us started, and 65 finished. I finished in 38th place, so roughly the middle of the pack, a little behind the middle of the pack. and a pretty interesting 28 days. So I averaged 155 miles a day for 28 days in a row. My goal was faster than that. I was shooting for 24 or 25 days. I'd ridden 200 miles a day many times, and my goal was to get up every morning and ride as close to 200 miles as I could every day. During the race, during the 28 days, I only rode 200 miles or more 4 times. There were some pretty rough events that changed my attitude from the beginning to the end. So I navigated with the paper route slip. So that paper you see there, I had a GPS. That's the cockpit of the bike, basically. It was a 22-page spreadsheet with turn-by-turn turn across the United States. So I pretty much used paper route slips for the whole route. So I have that file, Cyril, if you want it. And that's the course. So it was pretty cool. In Oregon and Idaho was paradise. You're still strong. You're feeling fresh. Wyoming and Montana changed everything. We hit really cold, freezing, blowing snow, and tough riding. So I had some 90-mile days in Wyoming, sleeping, freezing cold, and just really tough. So that's one of the passes in Yellowstone. To me, Colorado and Yellowstone and Montana and Wyoming, which I thought were going to be my favorite parts of the ride, mostly due to weather, were my least favorite parts of the ride. Climbing these passes in Yellowstone just got to be torture in 30-degree weather, and it was pretty tough. So that's the bike. There's a bivy sack and a sleeping bag and a seat bag, and that's pretty much it. So I had no civilian clothes, no shoes, no nothing. You're just riding, eating, and sleeping.
What month?
This is in June. We happen to hit some really cold weather in Yellowstone. This is my bike that I just finished in Africa, and we'll come back to this, but that's the contrast. I look at these two rides. I just did 3,000 kilometers across West Africa in the opposite kind of a ride, where we'd ride 10 hours a day. I did with my girlfriend, to go 30 or 40 miles, and the roads are so awful, and the food choices are so bad. So during the TransAm, even though you're riding, every 20 or 30 miles there's an ice machine and a soda fountain and a hot dog and a payday candy bar and whatever you want. In Africa it was completely different. So anyway, this is a natural sleeping spot on the TransAm. So I slept maybe 8 or 10 nights of the 28 nights in a post office, because small post offices lobbies are open and you can get in out of the weather. So this one I happened to arrive in, and this is what was going on when I got there. Other riders. And this is typical lodging in Africa. So we'd ride until the end of the day and sneak into the bush and camp, mostly, because the lodging is awful for the most part. We were choosing small back roads, and so the lodging is, although very hospitable and friendly, noisy, dirty, and not inexpensive in Africa. So it was much nicer to camp when we could. So we camped most nights. But the road in the United States is much nicer than the road in Africa. This is on the TransAm. I don't have too many pictures of TransAm because I was riding, and it was a solo event. So there's just a few here in the beginning, and then we'll get into Africa pictures. But this is a part of the ride in the Ozarks. So the mountains, in the heat and the humidity, for me it was one of the hardest physical parts of the ride. This was one of the hardest physical parts of the ride in Africa. It was pushing your bike with 3 gallons of water through sand. Most of it was rideable, but I walked a lot that day in particular. This is Wyoming. I put this picture in as one of my favorite pictures of the TransAm. At the time I took this picture, I was standing next to my bike bawling, tears running down my face, because I just come through Yellowstone, and one of those passes that you saw, in freezing cold weather, and you're riding 15 hours a day. So I hit this spot, and I turned out of a headwind. We had huge headwinds to the point of all day riding 4 miles an hour into the wind. It's a 90-mile day. That's how you get 90 miles. And I turned off of that. And that was one of the most emotional times on the TransAm for me. So that picture means a lot to me, kind of. This is the roads in Africa, totally different challenge. Mostly the roads were fun. We had no schedule. It wasn't a race. We were just out there seeing what we could do. It was mostly about the people. So a lot less stressful in that sense. We weren't trying to go fast. We didn't have even a plan of where we were going. We were just kind of going with the map. So that's our tour in Africa. We started in Accra, Ghana. And we chose the small roads on purpose. So Ghana is listed in the Lonely Planet as Africa for beginners, and it was true. Ghana is a fantastic place. Friendly, good services, food, incredible people. All through 3 countries, we never felt any threat of any kind. The worst was police checkpoints, and it wasn't a threat. It was that they want to know what your story is, and they have the authority to stop you and talk to you. So that was interesting, but it was really the story of the people and lodging, was wild. So here's a camp spot in bamboo. But it was really about the people. And Ghana is a country full of bicycles, so it was really fun. The kids would ride with us. The questions that we got from the local people changed as we went through the countries, but in Ghana it was, what are you selling? We got that question 10 or 15 times because they're moving about on their bikes with their loads that they're selling, and we had our bikes with our bags, and it was, what are you selling? We thought that was pretty cool. In the US, when people ask you questions on a bike tour, they say, how much did it cost, or how far are you going, or how much does it weigh, all the technical stuff. In Africa, it was, why are you doing this? What do you hope to accomplish? What is your mission? Do you have permission from your government? The one I got very often, which I didn't like, I grew to think was funny, was, you're so old, why are you doing this? I hate to see you suffer like this. Because there's just nothing in their culture that would inspire them to do anything like that. So the kids would ask us, what are you selling? What's in your bags? What are you guys doing here? It was really cool. These kids were really interesting. This was in the very north of Ghana. These kids are Ashanti kids, and the history of West Africa is mixed, awful in many ways. And so the black folks I was seeing in most of Africa were people that had a look of people I'm used to seeing here in California. It's former slaves that went and founded Liberia and settled much of West Africa. But these kids influenced are from Northern Africa. So there's a very different look and a very different, the kid there has tribal markings. When we started blowing up, we were handing out balloons. When we started blowing out the balloons, these kids ran. They had not seen a balloon. They did not know what it was. So, I mean, that's how wild it was. I actually took this picture stealth from my waist because when I was trying to take pictures of them earlier, they were running and covering their face. They didn't want their pictures taken. Unlike a lot of Ghanaians, everybody has a cell phone and they're into it and they love to have their picture taken. We had people wanting to have their pictures taken with us all the time. But the people are just super happy. There's always coconuts, food. The guy in the back there, Godwin, we stayed in his place. He had a little place on the river and we camped there for $4. It's just super, super nice. We did paved roads for about 3 days in northern Ghana and Ivory Coast. And while it looks good, we got 6 flats between the two of us in 3 days, and all of them were steel belted radial wires because the trucks run 3 axles, so that means they have 12 tires at the back axles, and so they'll run with 2 or 3 tires just completely blown and flapping. So they're spreading steel belted radial wires everywhere they go. So constant flats on the pavement. So we never get any flats in the dirt, but the dirt was not. Northern Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire had a lot of mosques. It was about 20% Muslim. So every morning at 4 a.m. you see the loudspeakers on top was the call to prayer, which was actually really cool. And about the time we wanted to get up anyway, and it's really peaceful sound. And to me, it was really, really nice. It was also great to see the Muslim culture in a majority Christian country And to these countries, I kept reflecting on, these people live so peacefully amongst each other. You know, there's no division at all. And so people would say, oh, you're from the U.S., everybody loves the U.S., I want to go to the U.S., can you help me go to the U.S.? Hold on, you know, it's better here in many ways. So there's a mosque, another mosque in the background, typical village situation there. But densely populated. So West Africa, really densely populated. So it was a challenge because there was no private time. Sometimes we'd get lodging just to get inside a room, 4 walls. We would camp. If people would find us, they'd stand outside our tent and stare at us. And you'd say, okay, I'm going to bed now. And they'd go, okay, good night, and stand there and stare at you. Or they just want to talk and hear your story. It's just constantly, you can't stop anywhere without a crowd of people coming to want to talk to you, which is great, but it gets old, you know, when you just need a minute to yourself. So we rode in northern Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire across Mole State Park and Comoé State Park. So we rode about over 200 kilometers, and the road in between had very little traffic. So we did about 400 kilometers altogether in the dirt with a guide. The guide is on a motorcycle with a rifle. They won't let you in the park without a guide. And we had to talk him into waiting, you know, an hour behind us and then catching up to us instead of just idling behind us on his motorcycle the whole time. But with no car, like 400 kilometers through the park, not a single car. It was really, really cool stuff. So the savannah in the north, this is a drier area up north. Elephants, baboons, tons of antelope, snakes, spiders, chimpanzees. So we went to a German research center. It's out in the middle of this park, and there's a guy from Spain, a doctor, animal researcher from Spain, running this program where they're researching chimpanzees that are making tools like they're not making tools in any other part of the world. I guess chimps are known for making tools, but these chimps are advanced, and his idea is that it's cultural. It's not a genetic trait. They're learning it from their society, how to make brushes of different lengths. So they're dipping it in water, dipping it in honey, or dipping it in ant hills or termite mounds to eat. And so they have different types of tools that the chimps are making. They've collected. It's pretty amazing stuff. So this is the guide that we hired, and my girlfriend and I. He had took his job very seriously. We paid him $10 a day. They wouldn't let us in the park without him. Both parks, we had to have an armed guide. And he carried a little bit of extra food and water for us. Drastically underestimated the amount of water we needed. So by the end of that trip through the park, we were using our water filter and drinking river water. A lot of rivers, a lot of water everywhere. Here we are crossing the river. And this just happened over and over and over again. So this particular scene was in, I think, Korhogo, a city in northern Cote d'Ivoire. And the kids just come out of the woodwork. At this same incident, about 5 minutes later, there was 20 kids there. And they were asking us questions about the bikes and our trips and what we're doing. What struck me was they always ask about your kids. So family is such an important thing there culturally. They'd always ask about the kids. So I didn't want to get into the second wife, and she's actually a Jew and I'm a Christian, and she doesn't have to, So without getting into all that, I have 2 kids and they're in university. When I said they're in 2 kids, they're grown in university, they clapped. These kids, teenagers, broke out in applause because our kids are in university. So school, they're so curious to learn. They're so hungry for learning that the kids were the most amazing part of the whole thing. So no matter where we went, it was the kid. We'd ride through a village like this, and the kids would come running to the side of the road to just watch us pass. And you can't stop and give a balloon or candy to everyone. So a lot of times we wouldn't stop. But sometimes we were looking for water and food. So the further west we got, food became more and more difficult. Ghana was pretty easy. Cote d'Ivoire got a lot tougher, and Liberia was unbelievably tough. So just the village scenes, just as friendly as can be, and amazing people, amazing color, people that have literally nothing. They're living on $3 a day, sharing what they have with their communities. Very, very strong communities, really strong families. You get an idea of how big that tree is when you see Sherry on her bike there right next to it. These huge, massive trees. The pictures don't really do them justice, but pretty incredible stuff. Yeah, this is in Mole State Park. So if you didn't recognize it, that's the barrel of a rifle there. So the armed guard was sitting next to Sherry on when she took that picture. This is a gas station in Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia. Almost all of the traffic on the road is motorcycles. Very few cars, very few trucks, motorcycles everywhere. So the roads are awful, and we're trying to ride the motorcycle track in between the washboard or rock or sand or gravel. There's no maintenance. This is camping in that park with the guide. They burn a lot of the areas to help feed the antelope, so they say, and prevent worse fires later in the dry season. I thought it was awful. I thought maybe you could strip burn it or do something, but they burn almost the whole thing. It's kind of crazy. Just more kids. The roads in Liberia were the worst yet. Liberia is a society that's functioning with zero government services. So they had an awful civil war end in 2003 that had 3 factions, 2 rebel factions and a government, and all 3 of them were absolutely awful to the civilian population. So it's amazing to be there. There's 0 tourists in Liberia, and we didn't see one in 3 weeks in Liberia. Not a single tourist. Everybody assumes you're an aid worker. So hello, Peace Corps lady, and everybody. I went to school once with a white person, and they taught me, people had just never seen white people, or for months and months had not seen a pale face. So we were everywhere we went an attraction, and it was really something to experience. Trying to find food. Here's a spot, typical sample of. We hit this Y in the road, and we stopped to confirm directions a little bit, and we weren't there 3 minutes, and Sherry had this crowd around her asking, the question. One of the questions here I think was really interesting. Do you have permission from your government to do this? They can't believe why we would want to do it. But just really happy people. It's not at all what I thought of West Africa. You see some of those pictures of the kids in the dirty T-shirt with no underwear on, and you think that's a typical UNICEF picture trying to raise money for this kid. For $1 a day you can save this kid. You look across the street and his mom's dad are sitting there with the Adidas jacket on, and the kid's fine. The kid's loving life, and there's no problem with this kid. So they're very, very happy people, and they live a rough life. But to me, it was amazing that how happy they were and how much they shared with each other. And here I was struggling. You talk about needing 4,000 or 6,000 calories a day to exercise, and at the end, I was eating. I couldn't eat anymore. The rice. Plain rice in Liberia means they take the fish chunks out. You can't get white rice. They just don't have it. There's no restaurant culture. There's no culture of anything like that. So they make one dish. Any place where you can buy food, and it's rice and either fish or chicken. Well, in Liberia, there's no refrigeration, no electrical grid, no transportation grid. So there's no food moving them out between markets. You can buy imported stuff. So I was buying warm cans of Coke for $1.50 a can, because it's for the wealthy people that are driving through in their aid vehicles, and no refrigeration, so it's warm, but it was liquids and calories I could trust, and packages of cookies, peanuts. They have peanut butter, because they make a very common meal all across West Africa is ground nut soup. So they use peanut butter to make the soup. It saved my life because I had peanut butter. But I really could eat no local food by the end. So it was cookies and packages. At the end in Liberia, we volunteered in this school for a week, which was another amazing experience. So this class has from 3-year-olds to 12-year-olds in the same classroom. So the teacher has a huge challenge, of course, and the 12-year-olds are totally not, they're bored to death, not getting what they need. So we started teaching column math, ones, tens, hundreds, columns, borrowing and carrying. I'm the worst student in the world. I'm teaching math to these 12-year-old kids. I can't believe it. And the teacher's pretty much just giving me her classroom, is sitting in the back of the room taking notes about how to teach column math because she didn't know it. She's an untrained teacher. She's willing but totally untrained. So here and this 12-year-old kid is getting it so fast, asking me to take his notebook home with me at night to write extra math problems in it, bring it back to him in the morning because he wants more work. So this is a Lutheran school that is funded by a Lutheran church here in the States in a community called Deanville, where these kids did not have a school before. There was no option. So there was a kid there, Reuben, 15-year-old kid, lived in a mud hut, 200 yards from the school. And he did not ask me for anything. He was a 15-year-old kid. He reminded me of my son, soft-spoken, really just a wonderful kid, really smart. The kids did not know how to read. They had a library full of books that were dusty, so no one's encouraging them to read. Teaching there is memorization and repeat. Memorize, repeat, memorize, repeat. That's all they do. So we were, with this kid, Reuben, I had him in the library, and I'm trying to teach him how to sound out words, because I'm trying to inspire him. If you could learn to read, if you can read, you can go far, He didn't know how to use a dictionary. He's a 12-year-old kid. So also English is their second language. They all grew up speaking tribal languages. So I would tell them over and over again, you should be very proud of the fact that you're in some ways more advanced students than students in the US because you already speak 2 languages. Most students in the US don't speak 2 languages. So it's trying to instill in them a pride of education. If you stop there for a minute, I'll go back to. And it's true. These poor kids are trying to go to school in a second language. The teaching is completely without training, but they want to learn so much. So it was really inspiring to me. Here I am feeling sorry for myself because I can't find food, but I get to go home, next week, and these kids are stuck here for the rest of their lives. And so it's pretty amazing experience to realize how lucky we are to have the opportunity to do an adventure like this, and be able to share it. It's great to be able to talk to a group of people who's interested in adventuring. I'm just a guy riding a bike, and doing something like this is being willing to say, yes, I'll do it, before you actually know what it entails. People always say, man, I wish I could do something like that. I'm sure many people in this room have heard that. I wish I could do that. Or someday I'm going to do that. Or, gee, I wish I wasn't scared of this or that. I'd do it. You just kind of have to do it and make it work otherwise. And that's what I did. This is back to the TransAm bike race. This is a place called the Bike House. It's in Virginia, up on the Blue Ridge Parkway, right before the finish, 2 days before the finish. And this place is called the Bike House because in 1976 they created the TransAm bike route for the bicentennial celebration. Thousands of people rode the TransAm bike route that year, starting on both coasts and riding both ways. Many thousands, several thousand people, 4,000 or 5,000 people rode it that year. And this woman, old woman at the time in 76, owned this house that was behind her house. And she said, I see all these cyclists coming through. What's going on? She found out about the ride. And she said, well, I'll open up the house. People can stay there. So this house has been the Bike House for 40 years. And it's filled with bike memorabilia. Every single room looks like that, with jerseys and T-shirts and posters and numbers. And it's one of the only lodgings on the TransAm that was as dirty as the lodging in Liberia. Place had not been cleaned in 40 years, I swear. But it was cool. So to me, here I am at the end of the TransAm. You kind of got that feeling, you're going to finish. You know, it's really emotional. I remember riding the last 2 days into Yorktown, Virginia, and just saying, okay, remember this, savor this. You know, don't screw up now, first of all, and remember this, because I'll probably never get to do this again. You know, it was 28 days, 1 hour, and 24 minutes, and so another room in the bike house. Every single room is like this. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the bike at the end of Africa. It was great. I broke one spoke. Other than that, zero mechanicals. So, like the TransAm bike, I went with very simple bike. You know, during the TransAm, I passed riders that were much faster and stronger than me, waiting for parts for their electronic shifters or their carbon wheels or their whatever it was. So, low tech is the way to go, and that's it. Thank you.
Were you not tempted to modify your bike saddle? I mean, it looks like it would hurt.
No, it doesn't hurt. It's funny because when Cyril was talking about hands and butt and feet, it's the exact same thing on the bike. And the butt is the least of your worries, really. My hands, at the end of the TransAm, the weakness in my left hand, I could not do a snap or a zipper. I could hand on the handlebars, but I couldn't manipulate any small snap or zipper because my strength and coordination in my left hand from nerve damage was so funky. So your butt is the least of your worries. After a while, you know, you just build the calluses there. I don't have any pictures to show you, but it's kind of like Cyril's hands and the other one.
Was there no open countryside in Africa except for the parks? Was it all pretty?
There was in the parks, yeah, but otherwise there's a village every 5 kilometers, and people walking up and down the roads with their load on their head, doing whatever they're doing to survive. So cassava is a staple that grows everywhere very easily. So people generally aren't starving, but they're living on cassava and an onion or a tomato here and there. I mean, it was shocking to me. And densely populated. I think their biggest problem, you know, I hate to say it, is corruption. Liberia has a new president right now, so people were very excited about this, but he's a footballer. He was a senator for 6 years and did nothing. And in Monrovia, at the end, we're trying to box up our bikes and kind of get ready to go, and there's constant police escorts through the traffic in Monrovia of black SUVs, you know, political, and I kept thinking, where are they all going? They're not doing anything for the people. So every minister of every department had a police escort every time you drove through town, but the people have nothing. You know, so it's just really awful. And right, you know, the last Ellen was the president of Liberia. She did end the cycle of coups. She did give up power peacefully in a democratic election. So there is some progress. So the people are full of hope, and just hope that continues.
What made you choose Africa for your 3-month adventure?
Yeah, that's a great question. We first of all, Sherry, my girlfriend, has done a lot of traveling. She rode across Australia, the Middle East. I had ridden all across Latin America and all across the U.S. She had ridden across Alaska, Canada. So we wanted to go somewhere where neither of us had been before, so it was new to both of us. So kind of left China, India, Africa, and then it became down to weather. We needed a dry season. So our first choice was Mozambique and more South Africa. But it was wet season there, so we had to choose the West.
Can you remind me which park the research center was in?
It's in Comoé National Park in Côte d'Ivoire, and it's an amazing place. It's in the middle of nowhere, so we'd ridden for 3 days without seeing a person to get there, and then there's this research center, and it's got this huge solar panel, bank of batteries, computers, different bird scientists and different groups of scientists were there from all over West Africa. So pretty cool place.
Do you have another one planned?
Yeah, I don't yet. I just got back. So I rode my bike yesterday for the first time in 2 weeks. I was really sick at the end. I rode the last day with a fever of 103 and holed up in a hotel room for a few days. So yeah, I just rode yesterday in beautiful Sonoma County. It was sunny and cool and beautiful, and there was root beer.
So were you getting sick on the food or something?
I got sick on something at the end from eating rice. Plain rice means they take the fish chunks out, and you don't know how long it's been there in the sand on the street, and yeah, I got really sick. You know how when you get sick you think you know? I'm not really sure, but you feel like you kind of know, and no more rice.
Did you guys have any like physical ailments that you had to overcome during the ride, like hurt anything?
Yeah, not really. We were pretty well prepared. The very last day, my girlfriend twisted her ankle in Monrovia. It was really a drag because we were going to the airport with our bike boxes that day. So she had a rough, she's way tougher than me. She did not get sick. She ate street food the whole way. But she twisted her ankle real bad the last day, so that was kind of awful. But yeah, and otherwise, no. We were doing such small distances. I mean, it was really hard distances, but it was 30, 40, 50 miles a day. It was not a distance thing. So. I mean, sometimes we were averaging, all of the dirt roads are either inches deep in dust, inches deep in sand, boulder strewn, or if there's a good road, it's washboard because they're driving like crazy on it. So there just is no good road. And you get on the pavement and you have the issue with the steel belted tires. So it was just no fun. It was not fun riding. Thank you very much for listening.